Hello everyone, thanks for joining us. Here's what's coming up on the world today. Cities around the world reinstating lockdown measures previously eased as global COVID-19 infections rise. A scaled-down Bastille Day is marked in France as President Emmanuel Macron says it will soon be compulsory for citizens to wear face masks in public. Plus, it's 5 years today since Iran and 6 major world powers reached a nuclear deal. We'll be discussing its existence and compliance. Welcome again. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Many countries and cities around the world are returning COVID-19 restrictions as cases rise globally. From Morocco in Africa to Asia, leaders are realizing they still need to do more to prevent spiraling deaths and spike in cases. Here's a global update.
About the COVID issue, because I just listened to a call
in the United Kingdom, following Prime Minister Boris Johnson's advice that citizens wear masks in confined spaces, Health Minister Matt Hancock announced in Parliament the compulsory use of face masks in shops.
We've therefore come to the decision that face coverings should be mandatory in shops and supermarkets. Last month, we made face coverings mandatory on public transport and in NHS settings. This has been successful in giving people more confidence to go on public transport and to a hospital setting when they need to.
France celebrates a modified Bastille Day today because of the coronavirus. The President, Emmanuel Macron, in a rare television interview, said he would like to see face masks mandatory in all public enclosed spaces and that this could come into effect on August the 1st. Australia has tightened restriction on movement as authorities struggle to contain a fresh outbreak of COVID-19 in the country's southeast that has pushed the national tally of cases beyond 10,000. The changes come as scores of new cases were uncovered in Victoria, the country's COVID-19 hotspot, despite a return to lockdown last week for nearly 5 million people in the state of Melbourne. Over in the United States, California Governor Gavin Newsom's decision on Monday to reimpose restrictions on bars, restaurants, gyms, and even ordinary office work to tamp down a surge of coronavirus infections is dimming economic growth prospects for the nation as a whole. The Golden State, with 40 million people, employs more workers than any other state in the nation, and its production of goods and services is about equal of the combined output of Florida and Texas, 2 other states that have also seen resurgences of the virus. Over in Africa, Morocco's Tangier city has become the latest to go back into lockdown. In Latin America, the Colombian capital Bogota has been placed under a 2-week lockdown, and in the Middle East, both Israel and the West Bank have reintroduced restrictions in response to a rise in cases.
The ashes of Mexican coronavirus victims in the United States are being returned to their families. According to the government, more than 1,500 Mexicans have died from COVID-19 in the United States, including 728 in New York. Many of the victims died weeks ago, but a delay in securing the right documentation meant their loved ones were not able to repatriate them any sooner. The return was also hampered by the limited number of flights from the U.S. to Mexico because of the lockdown restrictions. The Mexican government paid for the remains to be repatriated and will next transfer the ashes to the victims' hometowns across the country. As we said earlier in the Global Report, it's July 14th, a very special day in France, but the country only held a scaled-down annual Bastille Day celebration with none of the usual parade, large as they would have been, down the Champs-Élysées Avenue in concession to the COVID-19 pandemic. President Emmanuel Macron, whom we saw earlier, stood in the back of a military jeep reviewing ranks of socially distanced troops in the Place de Concorde. Square after a flypast by military aircraft. This year, the focus is majorly on healthcare workers who have been in the front lines of the country's battle against the coronavirus. They joined troops on the square for the ceremony, garnering applause from attendees. There were no spectators at the Place de la Concorde to avoid spreading the disease that has killed at least 30,000 people in France. Bastille Day dates back to the 1789 revolution. The day citizens stormed the Bastille fortress, which was used to detain prisoners and had become a symbol of the harsh rule of the French monarchy. A lot of people had to watch that from home, a very unusual Bastille Day celebrations in France, but at least some parts of the celebration remained. The troops there, the parade, the balloons, the blue, white and red floating into the sky, and the fireworks also went ahead. But movement has been restricted still across Paris because of the coronavirus pandemic. One of the highlights also during the parade was the Minister of French Industries, Agnès Pannier-Runacher, panicking after forgetting her face mask upon arrival at the ceremony. As she put her hands over her mouth, another official comes to her rescue, handing her a spare face mask. Let's talk to Hugo Oligbo, a freelance journalist in Saint-Louis, from where she joins us. Hugo, thanks for joining us and happy Bastille Day to you. The coronavirus pandemic may have dampened the celebratory mood in France, but I believe people are still finding ways to mark the day.
Well, absolutely, Amarachi, is a special day in France, but unusually quiet this day. I went out this morning, I saw the flags, but it's really quiet, very unusual. And usually last year on this day, young people or lots of people are outside in Saint Louis to see the fireworks. But this year that we've been no fireworks, people have been asked to reduce the celebrations, probably just at home with your friends at the parks, within what is acceptable, in terms of gatherings of people. So it's been really quiet one this day. And as you also mentioned, is really to celebrate the staff, for those who worked tirelessly during the pandemic, the healthcare workers, the supermarket staff, the janitors, the teachers who took care of staff of health workers during the pandemic, those who really worked hard during that pandemic, who had to work, who must work during that coronavirus outbreak. These are the ones being celebrated today, as you can see in the images there. And also, governments from neighboring countries were able to accept patients during the pandemic from Switzerland, from Luxembourg, from Germany were also represented, and Austria as well represented there. And it's a celebration of also the military. You remember for the first time since World War II, there was a military hospital set up to help fight the coronavirus pandemic. So today is actually to celebrate these people who really worked hard to reduce the number of infections. As you mentioned earlier, 30,000 French people died in that pandemic. So it's really an interesting day, really different from what we've seen over decades now.
Yeah, and those figures are really high, even for France. Many of Europe actually being the second hotspot for the pandemic. But talk to us about what President Macron announced earlier today, announcing that people may have to begin wearing masks. It might become compulsory for people to wear that in public. And also, are Parisians happy about this move? A lot of people in France were under lockdown for many weeks. France having one of the most strict lockdown measures to help curb the coronavirus. How are they adjusting to what has become the new normal?
So far, masks have been compulsory on public transportation, but now it will be extended from August 1 to public or closed spaces like the supermarkets, which has not been that way since the lockdown was eased. So I actually saw a poll by a website called The Connection, and I found out that 90% of French people say they accept this new measure. They are all afraid or are concerned about the second wave of the virus, which experts say might even be worse than the first wave. So people are really accepting this. Just about 8% of people say they do not want to wear masks in enclosed public spaces, but that's what it's going to be. Now, how will it be enforced? Will there be fines, like from €135 fine for those who are caught without a face mask on public transportation? We don't know what the amount will be, but there will be definitely fines for those who do not wear their face masks in closed public spaces. And I will tell you that I've been to supermarkets, I've been to shops, and people really just working without their masks. The people are no more concerned really about the spread. But with this announcement, I'm sure, scientists have come out to say there could be a second wave, and they've asked the president to ensure that this new regulation is enforced. So French people or those who live in France will be willing to accept this.
Ugochi, thank you again for bringing us up to speed. Do enjoy the rest of the day as much as you can, in safety, of course. And thanks again for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
14th July is another special date in international diplomacy. It was on this day in 2015, Iran and 6 major world powers reached a nuclear deal, capping more than a decade of negotiations with an agreement that could transform the Middle East. Thousands of Iranians took to the streets to celebrate the deal back in 2015, but now the country faces increased sanctions, an economic crisis, and the coronavirus pandemic. Some feel it is time to pull out of the deal. Iran had been expected to lay out its latest position on the deal earlier this year, but after the U.S. drone killing top Iranian military commander Qasem Soleimani, there was a major escalation of hostilities in Washington. President Rouhani says Iran will be open to talks with the United States if Washington apologizes for exiting this deal in 2015. Iran has blamed, its development on the failure of the deal on the United States, saying that the deal still had meaning as a multilateral diplomatic initiative would have been possible, but the United States did disgrace itself by withdrawing from the agreement. Director General, Bolitac Center for Diplomacy and Strategic Studies, Professor Bola Ketarawa, joins us now for this discussion. Professor, can we at this point say the JCPOA is dead? Has it failed?
I think we can look at it from 2 perspectives. It has failed, but not totally. At least there's a measure of success that we can talk about. First of all, in terms of success, if you look critically at the ultimate objective of the 2015 agreement, it is to actually delay, Iran from quickly acceding to nuclear status in international relations. So the signatories quite know that Iran has been developing, but they try to slow down, the timing in terms of, plutonium enrichment, in terms of capacity to quickly acquire that particular nuclear status. And to that extent, at least in between 2015 and now, Iran has not succeeded in acquiring that particular status. So in this case, they have succeeded to a limited extent, but it is more of failure than success. And one good illustration is just to refer you to what happened in the research center in Natanz in last Thursday. There was a fire outbreak in that particular center. It is a major nuclear development unit. So in this case, I'm sorry, in this case, the center has been destroyed partially, but work is still continuing, which means that the agreement has not deterred Iran from pursuing, the acquisition of this particular nuclear status. So it has been majorly a failure. And more importantly, the mere fact that the U.S. withdrew from the agreement is a mark of a failure. There is no collective approach in the fight against nuclearization.
Professor Akitariwa, we'll have to bring you back to talk some more about this. But thanks again. Once again, your analysis really appreciated on The World Today.
Thank you.
We have more coming up on The World Today after the break. Plus, how curious can a cow get? This one wandered off into a police station in Australia. Was he arrested, though? Welcome back to The World Today. Nigeria's chargé d'affaires of the permanent representative to the United Nations, Ambassador Samson Itegboje, is heading the UN's 31st special session on the coronavirus disease, which began last week. The convening of the special session of the General Assembly follows a request by Azerbaijan on behalf of the member states of the non-aligned movement contact group meeting in response to COVID-19, which was hosted in May by Azerbaijan. A special session is a mini General Assembly called to deal with special matters, this time focused on the coronavirus pandemic. The special session started on Friday last week and continues. However, the Assembly meeting is to be decided by members. Ambassador Itegboje joins us now. He is in New York. Ambassador, thank you for making time to be with us today. The UN hosts several meetings every year. Many times the discussions and the resolutions do get lost in the news, except by those who are running in UN circles. So what does this special session hope to achieve?
Thank you so much for having me, and good day, Nigerians. Like you know, the COVID-19 has wrought a lot of havoc and in many countries, including Nigeria. And so there's need for partnership to marshal out plans as to how to deal with this scourge. And we are expecting that the summit, or rather the General Assembly, the special session, will deal with how to ensure, for example, on the availability and non-catalyzation of vaccines. Like you know, they want to ensure that these vaccines are accessible and that they are affordable. And then in their trials, we want to ensure too that there will be no discrimination, and these things will be done in a very fair manner, and to ensure that countries are not discriminated upon when it comes to the issue of trial vaccines. And I think we also will use this General Assembly to seek for ways of having some debt relief, especially for developing countries. Debt relief, or even outright cancellation of debt, because like you know, let's take our country, Nigeria, for example. The COVID-19 has really brought about social and economic dislocation. Like you know, we've been suffering from the Boko Haram terrorist activities. As if that was not enough, we had problems when the prices of oil crashed. And now COVID-19 pandemic has set in. So we need to have that push to see how we can have debt cancellation. Amarachi.
Yeah, and what role will Nigeria be playing in this special meeting? Because we hear all of these discussions going on, and most times we do usually hear from other countries such as the United States and all the big countries in the UN. So what role will Nigeria be playing in this special session, and what is expected of us?
Yeah, first of all, as the interim President of the Assembly. We are going to set the modalities for the election of a substantive president, and that is already on. And as it looks right now, the current president of the 44th General Assembly, Ambassador Tijani Muhammad Bande, is going to be the president of the special session. What that means is that he's now going to be wearing two caps as president of the General Assembly, 74th session, and as president of the 31st special session on COVID-19. So that once he's elected, then he's now going to draw out modalities as to how the session will pan out. There are some technical issues that still have to be dealt with. For example, the UN still does not have the capacity to accommodate simultaneous interpretations when it comes to virtual meetings. Even though Azerbaijan, the president, has promised to assist in that direction, there are other areas too that the president will be dealing with. Issues of members of the Credentials Committee, members of chair of the various committees of the General Assembly. He will now have to sit down, consult with the member states, and see how those issues can be dealt with before we go into the session specifically.
Ambassador Samson Itegboje, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. We do wish you the very best in the deliberations as we all collaborate to get rid of these coronavirus. Thanks again.
Thank you so much for having me.
Animals usually are allowed to roam wherever they please, but what happens when they're found in the most unexpected places? How about a police station? Footage uploaded to Facebook by Queensland Police Service showed they were visited by an unusual suspect to their police station in the remote northwestern town of Dumagdi. A cow, a curious animal, was spotted on CCTV cameras wandering around outside before entering the building itself. As surprised staff members can then be seen shooing the animal out again. An accompanying message posted on Queensland Police Service read, "We're still at a loss as to how this bold bovine made its way into the Dumagdi police station, but we're glad it moved on without hurting anyone." And a look at how far public places will go to ensure social distancing. A pub landlord in Cornwall, southwest England, has devised a shocking method, literally shocking method, to enforce social distancing at his bar by installing an electric fence. When pubs and restaurants reopened on July 4th, Johnny McFadden realized customers at the Star Inn would not be able to access they had done before the coronavirus lockdown if they were to adhere to government advice. So he says a little bit of rope would not have made much of a difference to the drinkers' habits, but they take much more notice if they're at risk of an electric shock. Now, despite early concerns from his insurance broker, McFadden has been assured that the fence is legal as long as a warning sign is clearly attached. So he puts its effectiveness down to the fear factor and people following their animal instincts. In this case, customers do not know it yet, but he hasn't switched on that fence already.
I don't actually want to say it's not switched on.
Bottom line, be careful out there. Thanks for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubani.